We have a brand new color in the One Piece card game, and it's yellow, which means it's time to introduce Big Mom, or Charlotte Linlin. Yellow introduces the ability to manipulate your own life and sometimes your opponents, prevent trigger abilities, or to even manipulate more trigger abilities for your own. Big Mom does that exactly, and we're going to talk about her and the other yellow leaders that are going to be introduced in OP03. But first, if you need to, go ahead and go through the video chapters below, and this is going to be a beginner's guide to Big Mom, or Charlotte Linlin. And if you want to see any other leader or really anything else similar to this, let me know in the comments below what you want to see. Now, as far as I know, there are 5 different yellow leaders coming out of OP03. There is Charlotte Linlin, the one that we're going to talk about. There's Katakuri, the starter deck Yamoto, which all 3 of these are going to be our mono-colored yellow leaders. And then there's going to be green yellow Arlong and black yellow Linlin. In my opinion, mono yellow Linlin is the best one out of the bunch, with Katakuri right beside it. I do believe Katakuri beats Linlin more often than not, and maybe even other yellow leaders, which probably makes him the best. I think if you're planning to play black yellow Linlin, you may as well play mono yellow. And there are some merits with some of the new black support and the fact that you can play some of the black cards, and as well as impact wave, things like that. And you get to under 2 or less life, or less life than your opponent, pretty much starting out the game more often than not to get those effects. But my opinion remains the same. If you want Yamoto's abilities, you may as well play Whitebeard, unless you really like yellow. I don't have that much experience with the green yellow Arlong, so I don't want to steer you in the wrong direction, but if you do, let me know in the comments below how it is. The leader effect for Linlin is pretty straightforward, but really quite good. She says if you attach 2 Dawn, you can grab the top or bottom card of your life, and if your life is at 2 or less, then you can place a card of your choosing on top. This is incredibly good when you start considering things like Shirahoshi, the draw 3 and pitch 2, which is, you know, graceful charity to filter out your hand, or something like Thunderbolt to pop something 5 or less, as if they swing at you, you get those things for free. One thing to consider is that you really want to be at 3 life, not so much at 2 or less life. This is because your ability will work since you add a card to your hand when you're at 3 or less. You can still use the same effect and place one on top since you're technically at 2 or less life when you do take it. There's a lot of different things you can do, but the leader style reminds me, at least a little bit, of Dofi, since you are required to have 2 of those Dons attached to get an effect, and you're looking to trigger cards and things that are specific to the Big Mom archetype. Speaking of, let's talk about the cards that you want to see in this deck in particular. A lot of the bread and butter of the deck basically will be any of the Big Mom pirates, and that begins with the 1-drop Charlotte Pudding. So he searches the top 4, for some reason not the top 5, for a Big Mom pirates type card other than herself, or a Sanji, which I guess is, you know, based on the lore. There are a plethora of cards you can get, but the main ones include the Sanjay 2K, which is tempting to play, but really not that great on board, so I would just avoid that. And then there are different skillless cards like your 3/5s or the 4/6s, 5/7s, etc. that have the Big Mom tag on it. There's also Charlotte Cracker, which is a great card on curve, but some reason everyone wants to get rid of. The effect itself is really good since you are usually going to be less life than them, and you can get that double attack easily. Charlotte Smoothie, which is not too bad in the deck if you want to get to 2 or 3 or 2 life quickly, but it is slow. Her trigger, along with Crackers, gets to play this card if you discard one. And of course, Paraspiro, I don't know how to say his name, gets that same effect as well. And these trigger effects are pretty amazing since your leader can play this or place them into your life pretty much at any time at 2 or less. And pretty much, I mean, what you really want to is make your opponent swing into them, and then later on play the bigger moms and recover that that life. All of these are going to be basically your main attackers, and I think throughout the game, what you really want is some of those paros on the board, the 3 drops, more often than not, because you can just keep swinging with them and you just get rewarded for them to remove them anyway. And if you go through the rest, we basically have our other 2K searchable cards in Strusen, I don't know. You never play this card because it's never worth it unless you win that turn by popping a 1-cost blocker. And other than the Charlotte Pudding, which is not searchable by the 1-drop, it is searchable by the Pero. So again, it's really important that you do want to have those on board to get that top 3 search. Lastly, Charlotte Roulette, which is A simple blocker, which can be played for free, basically with your Big Mom effect or from life, or if the RNG gods are in your favor, they can be placed by the Big Moms effect. Speaking of, next up are the bigger boys and Big Moms. There are two significant categories as well as two of the bigger moms. 4-drop category has Rush if you have less health than your opponent, and you can look at your top of your life or theirs and place it at the top or bottom. This is a little bit better than in the category leader because you're already doing that throughout the game for both yourself and them. You don't really have the bigger option as Linlin for a leader or as a leader. So it's just nice to have something where you can play and then find if you're running to a Pump Gibson, Flash Fire, Jet Pistol, whatever it may be. But you just have to be careful how you do sequence it. Although you do get the top or bottom look at effect, you don't get Rush if you are less life than them. So yeah, again, just be careful that you are playing them first if you're less life, and then swing into them and have their ability to take that less life anyway. 8-drop category is pretty decent. It's pretty good secret rare. I think I'm not playing it correctly though, because I'm not a huge fan of it. Going second curve makes it a little awkward to play if it's your only play. It can kind of clog up your hand since it has no counter. And the best thing about this card is that it is an 8 or less huge range. It is just a big range. You can include itself in the mirror, and it can include your own cards on board. But I mean, sometimes if you run into like a Hirohoshi and you place it back into your life, and you can just do it that way, or a blocker, which kind of is redundant because you don't really want to place a blocker again because it didn't block, so it didn't really do anything for you. Still, if you swing with the Pero or a Cracker, you can play this and then just play that for free after they swing into your life. Just stuff like that, that's really cool. And there's a lot of targets that are really annoying to deal with, like the 8-cost kid. That's a big target for this guy to place right back into life, which is why we'll probably see less of him, I think, in this set, but that's just me. Then there are two big moms. The 7-drop, in my opinion, is so good. I think going first as a curve for this guy or for this lady, basically providing the choice for your opponent to lose a life they'll likely never see again, or have to deal with another life on your end. You get an 8k attacker, which easily becomes a 9, pairing this with Soul Pocus, well, 9 with the Dawn, and then pairing this with Soul Pocus, it creates a lot of difficult decisions for your opponent, which is why I like it a lot. I think Soul Pocus, we'll talk about it a little bit later, is a little situational and, you know, loses its luster later into the game. But I think with the 7 cost, and as well as that card earlier into the game, it does become a nuisance. Now the 10 drop is kind of a dumb card. It's about as dumb functionally, and it's about the same functionally as the 9 drop Whitebeard, where you gain a life and your opponent trashes a life. That's the biggest part. Your opponent just loses a life just for no reason. While it is a 10 cost, it is pretty much all your Dawn and your commitment. You create a situation where it might be a losing one to a winning one, where your opponent has to get back on the back foot. But you do have to be careful playing this card, because you either need a decent amount of life already, depending on how many characters your opponent has, or how many characters you have as well to actually close the game out. Because sometimes you don't don't you want to swing unless it means you winning the game, or at least getting closer to that after you play it. Also, back-to-back Linlins, like the 10 drops, can get really out of hand in the right circumstances, because you're guaranteeing 2 life. They're not seeing a 12k swing and then 2 life for yourself, which is just silly, because sometimes those life coming from the deck into your life can have triggers as well. It just creates really silly situations in general, and with time rolls. Like, I know time rolls is going to be really annoying later on or in this set because of Linlin, because you know the tiebreakers can be the life, and right before overtime you're just gonna, I don't know, just have fun with it. You know, that's I'm sure it's gonna be really a lot of fun in the upcoming tournaments. Finally, let's talk about the event cards that are available to you, because they're all pretty good, just a little situational. Ikoku gives you an extra 1k when your opponent swings for 9. Thunderbolt, like I mentioned before, can pop a 5 cost, which is cool. Probably better in Katakuri, because you can bottom deck or play something from the top to the bottom and you don't really care about, or you do care about, and then you can just Thunderbolt and crit one or trash one from there. Soul Pocus comes out of the starter deck which is great from your hand or from your life, but usually something like this is not as good when you play it later. Like if they have 0 life, obviously, or if you know that you're gonna be losing next turn if you do pay 5, that type of thing. But it is good when you have equal amounts of life, because now your opponent has to make that decision where it doesn't do I want to make it harder for me to win or easier for them to win, you being them. But I really do like Soul Focus, and it really works well for this deck, because more often than not, it just means like if you're at 3 or less life, you place it on top, you basically make them revive a life or place a life, or if you're being aggro, which you should be swinging 7s and whatever you may be on your end to bring them down to a lower life. It just means a guaranteed life given more often than not. Arrow is really good in my opinion. They can deter from those annoying 7k swings. It just is good and on par with these other 3k counter cards. There are other event cards too, like Tropical Torment, that trashes a life, but I don't really recommend it because it becomes a little useless later into the game. Buzzcut Mochi is nice, but also situational, so I don't really like it either. But that pretty much wraps up all of the archetype cards that you'll run into, most of them. I mean, there's other cards like the smaller, I think 2 or 3 costs, I forget what it is, but they give your Linlins banish and as well as double attack, which in my opinion, I don't really want to waste the Dawn on doing that to try to close out the game, when more often than not, like those Linlins, after you play it, you're going to be in a winning position or try to be in a winning position. So that's just my opinion. There's a lot to yellow in general, and I think it takes a little bit of time to get used to, but let's go ahead and move on to suggested turn by turns. I think the turn by turns are pretty, I think they're pretty straightforward. I think turn 1, you want to play Charlotte. All right, you want to look for your searchers. Turn 2 on 3 Dawn or even on 4 Dawn, you get to either swing with your leader if you really want to take a life. Like if you want to get Tsunami, that would be a good time to do that, because they usually don't swing. But more often than not, you swing 5 with your leader and then play Pero to get a body on board. Turn 3, you want to play the 4/6 skillless or even 5/7 if you want to choose it to do that and go that way. Or if you want to go a little bit more efficient on your curve, you can play another Pero and then swing with lead at 7, so that way you can use your effect depending on how aggro your opponent has been. Or if you use the leader effect beforehand, you can be at 3 life and then play something from your hand afterwards. And then turn 4 or on 7 Dawn, basically you want to play the 7 cost. I think unless you're really in a losing position, or if you're going against like Zoro, you really don't want to tap out. The 7 cost is going to put you ahead a lot. Again, an AK body, unless you're going against Ace, or just in general like a Whitebeard player where they can just pop it using Flame Emperor, I think that is the play to do. Otherwise, it just becomes your last few turns. 4-drop Katakuri is not a bad idea either. And then either on 9 Dawn or 8 Dawn, I do believe you want to play another 7 cost or just swing with a leader again. It just really depends on the situation, but really want to get into a position where you have a decent board. You've taken care of their board either by swinging or just threatening their life more often than not for them to defend, and then play the 10 drop. That's really what it comes down to. You really want to play that 10 drop. Finally, let's talk about my deck list and what I've been playing currently, or what I suggest for you to play and start out. So most of these cards are going to be play sets, or at least of 4s, right? And I've went back and forth on like the event cards in general, and as well as what skill is to play, things like that. I think basically, again, you want the 2k counters that are decent, which is going to be the Sanjis, the Puddings, the Struzhans, right? The Charlotte should be able to search those, except for the Charlotte Pudding. Obviously, you want to get some of these other searchable cards like the Brulee, and as well as the Baron and the Pero. The Pero will get pretty much everything else, or at least the Charlottes as well. And then you can also get some of these other event cards. All the event cards here are searchable by both of these guys. So you really want to keep it consistent and search what you need. And then we also have, again, 4 of the 10 drop Linlins, I don't think you'd play less than 4. I mean, you can play 3, honestly, but I mean that's just gonna be your win con, and it's just pretty much your best card out of the deck. I can't really say otherwise for that. 2 of the secret rare Katakuris and 2 of the other 4-drop categories. I think some people play 4 of the 4-drop categories. I personally don't like it, simply because it doesn't have a trigger effect, and as well as the fact that it doesn't have counter, and it just doesn't feel good having multiple of these guys. I played it at 4 first, played it at 3 after, and then went down to 2. Just went to a place where I'm like, I just don't really care about this. I don't care about paying for and swinging with 6k, but it is nice to have that on play effect to look at your life or theirs, and kind of prevent any of these shenanigans from triggers. I already kind of talked about the secret rare, but it remains the same as far as that goes, of my feeling, and as well as the situational effects. Again, it's another 8k, which I think just like Ace just eats that up with Flame Emperor. I'm telling you, like that as well as the 7 cost, which is not in this build. I've opted to play more of the trigger cards instead, right? I want to play more of these event cards like Soul Pocus. I think if you aren't playing Soul Pocus, then you play the 7-drop. That is what I kind of came down to. The 1 cost 3k counter as well is another option if you want to have it replace the event card slot. But I like memes, and I like a fun game. And honestly, again, if you are just beginning out with this leader, and you want to use the effects more often than not, Soul Pocus is going to be such a fun card for you to utilize throughout the game, and as well as the leader effect. 3 of the Thunderbolts, it's really good. Not much to say about that. So you pay 2 to get rid of a 5, or you just make them run into it, which is great because that prevents another swing. And if your opponent is smart, they'll kind of play around it. But I mean, obviously if they have more than 2 attacks and they're all 5 costs, like you can't really play around it. Ikuku is really good. It's 2 costs that is better than any other 2 costs in the game, because it has that extra 1k power, and a lot of people swing for 9, and you ended up just going to 10 for 2, which is just great. Hopefully that kind of explains that current deck list. Obviously, it's not going to be the end all be all, and I'll be changing it throughout the format and to see what is best. But again, starting out, and as well as what I've found success with, that has been pretty good. Now, my final thoughts on this leader, and as well as deck in general, I think this leader is good. I think, again, Katakuri might see more play. I think success-wise, I think it did see more success across the seas, but we never know for the NA tournaments upcoming, right? These online ones, Gen Con, all these other ones that are scheduled, we won't know how that's going to be turning out. So that's all I can say about that. But in general, like, life manipulation is really good. The Big Mom, the 10-drop is just so silly. On curve, I don't think there's a lot of decks that feel better than this deck. I could have some recency bias for OP02 or OP03, I mean, from OP02, but I think it's really good. That Ikuku event card is really good. Just, again, the extra 1k power is just silly. And I think just like in yellow in general is like a tier 1 archetype deck, right? Just in general. Now, the cons really come down to red in general, right? I think like Zoro is kind of hard to keep up with. Whitebeard is still really good, and Ace in general just removes all of your bodies, which you kind of rely on those things to advance the game. Like, you can't just keep trying to play 10-drop Linlin when you don't have things to swing with it afterwards, or just in general throughout the game to do life or to deal life. Also, black is kind of annoying as well. So I mean, that tier 1 prediction might be knocked down just a little bit by both of those colors, because Borsalino is really annoying. Like, it's not really like Borsalino and like all these other cards that can't be KO'd. You just have to swing into them. You don't really have much option otherwise, right? And I think just in black in general, like, they have a lot of removal. They reduce the cost for your Katakuris, your Linlins, whatever it may be, right? It just really gets out of hand sometimes. But pick up the deck, try it out, learn it as much as possible, and you'll learn those matchups, and I think you'll be rewarded. I think the next deck that I'll be doing is Katakuri, which is a little bit of a higher ceiling than this deck in my opinion, and just in general, I think both decks are really good. But let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.